Just moments ago, the echo of stiletto heels against marble signaled more than a dramatic exit, it marked a rupture in the royal hierarchy. Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, stormed out of a palace event after witnessing an act of public humiliation that left Catherine, Princess of Wales, visibly shaken. What triggered this royal rebellion? And why was Camilla, the Queen Consort, left frozen in disbelief? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The Windsor banquet was meant to be a show of unity, a rare gathering of senior royals under one roof, designed to project harmony and poise amidst a backdrop of increasing public scrutiny. But inside those walls, civility was only a mask, and it cracked fast. What was advertised as a celebration turned into a masterclass in subtle warfare. As the evening unfolded, it became clear to several guests that this night had been choreographed not to uplift, but to undermine. The room, dripping in gold and history, quickly turned into a stage for something far more sinister. All eyes were on Catherine as she entered. Dressed with the effortless grace the public adores her for, she was expected to sit near the centre, close to Charles, Camilla, and the other key figures of the monarchy. But just minutes before the event began, an aide whispered to her that her seat had been reassigned. Without complaint, she followed instructions. But Sophie noticed. The new seat wasn't just further from the head table, it was symbolically isolating. Worse, Camilla had been briefed on the change and said nothing. When Catherine was later skipped during the formal toast, her poised smile faltered for a fleeting second. Enough for Sophie to see, enough to feel, and that wasn't all. When the event's order of proceedings was subtly altered to remove Catherine's scheduled speaking role, something weeks in the planning, the hum of confusion grew louder. No explanation was offered. Just a quiet shrug from an aide close to Camilla's camp. Sophie's eyes scanned the room. She saw the brief, smug glance Camilla cast toward her husband. She saw the discomfort in William's clenched jaw, his fingers drumming against the table, and she saw Catherine, gracious as always, refusing to show pain. Without a word, Sophie rose. Her movements were deliberate, unflinching, conversations hushed as her chair scraped against the floor. No royal walks out of a formal event without consequence. And yet here she was, walking out with eyes blazing, a silent protest echoing louder than any spoken word. Camilla didn't move. Her expression froze, lips parted as if caught mid-breath. Charles leaned in but said nothing. The monarchy, for a moment, looked helpless. Within the hour, palace aides scrambled to downplay the incident, but nothing could erase the image of Sophie's empty chair, or the whispers now leaking from inside the palace, whispers that painted the evening not as an accident, but as an ambush. Some called it sabotage, others vengeance. But one thing was certain. Whatever happened that night was not spontaneous. It was rooted in something deeper, older, and far more dangerous than a dinner party gone wrong. But to understand Sophie's dramatic stand, we must uncover the events leading to this explosive moment and the silent war quietly simmering behind palace gates. For years, the monarchy portrayed Sophie and Catherine as the quiet pillars of the crown, but inside the palace, old rivalries festered. Catherine's growing popularity was not just a public phenomenon, it was a private threat to Camilla's influence. Sophie's alliance with Catherine wasn't merely friendship, it was resistance. After the storm of Megxit left a gaping void in the royal landscape, the burden of public continuity fell silently onto two unlikely shoulders, Catherine and Sophie. While others scrambled to adjust their place in a monarchy thrown off balance, these two women stepped into the spotlight with grace and resilience. Their appearances became more frequent, their patronages more visible. The firm relied on them subtly at first, then openly as the face of a stabilizing monarchy. But not everyone welcomed this new arrangement. When Charles officially took the throne, Camilla's influence surged behind palace doors, and with that rise came a quiet recalibration of power, one that did not include making room for Catherine's soaring popularity. What began as passive discomfort soon turned into active discomfort. Camilla, once seen as an outsider, was now wielding a scepter of invisible authority. Behind closed doors, she had become the gatekeeper of appearances, access, and influence. Her new position gave her the ability to shape narratives, and she used it. Catherine's natural charisma, her effortless ability to connect with the public, and her poised media image weren't viewed as assets. They were viewed as distractions, threats to the fragile balance Camilla had fought to secure. The two women had never clashed publicly, but privately, their camps began to drift into opposition. Tensions grew quietly, but unmistakably. There were murmurs about overlapping engagements and disputes over shared patronages. Events Catherine had long been involved with were subtly redirected. In palace meetings, decisions once made jointly were now filtered through Camilla's circle. Catherine never objected publicly. She knew the cost of confrontation. But Sophie noticed. She saw the calculated reshuffling, and more importantly, she saw who was pulling the strings. Sophie had always been fiercely loyal to the institution, but her loyalty wasn't blind. As a woman who had spent years earning her place without scandal or spectacle, she recognized the slow burn of palace politics. She knew a campaign when she saw one, and this one, aimed squarely at dimming Catherine's influence, reeked of a coordinated effort. She stood by Catherine not out of obligation, but because she understood the quiet damage being done behind smiling photographs and scripted appearances. Meanwhile, Catherine's popularity showed no sign of slowing. Her connection with the public deepened. Polls showed her eclipsing even Charles in approval. She was becoming more than a royal figure. She was becoming a symbol of modern royalty. And that, to Camilla, was an uncomfortable reality. In private meetings with Charles, she reportedly voiced concerns that Catherine's image was outshining the throne itself, that balance needed to be restored, that the monarchy could not be seen to revolve around one woman's charm. It wasn't about pettiness, it was about control. And Camilla, now Queen Consort, wasn't going to lose hers. As whispers turned into strategies, a covert campaign began. Its goal was not just to sideline Catherine, but to break her quiet strength. It didn't happen by accident. Sources close to the palace suggest that Catherine's humiliation was the result of calculated intent, an orchestrated gesture designed to cut her down publicly. From seating charts to speaking slots, every move at the banquet told a story, and none of it favoured the Princess of Wales. In the hours leading up to the royal banquet, Catherine's team had meticulously prepared. She was scheduled to speak, her seat was charted near the royal core, and every element of her appearance was measured to reflect the grace expected of her station. But just 20 minutes before the guests began to arrive, something shifted. A senior aide, tightly aligned with Camilla's inner circle, approached Catherine's private secretary with a necessary protocol revision. The change was subtle. On the surface, her seat would be moved 3 places down. But, in the language of royalty, where hierarchy is encoded in physical arrangement, it was a deliberate demotion. Her new placement, adjacent to minor diplomats and away from the center of the royal table, sent a message without words. And Catherine understood it. What followed was a series of quiet betrayals. The speech she had rehearsed, one meant to introduce a major charitable initiative, was removed from the evening's program altogether. No reason was offered. The host of the evening simply glanced at Catherine when the speaking slot came and went, then moved on as if nothing had been omitted. The Princess of Wales, ever composed, smiled through it, but Sophie watched it unfold with growing unease. She noticed the subtle glances exchanged between members of Camilla's staff, as if confirming a plan successfully executed. She watched the Queen Consort herself give a nod so slight it could be dismissed, yet its timing was undeniable. It came precisely as Catherine's name was skipped in the formal acknowledgements. Then came the moment that shifted everything. A senior figure, well connected to Camilla's court, stood to give a toast and intentionally mispronounced Catherine's title, referring to her as the Duchess of Cambridge, a title she no longer officially used. A ripple of awkwardness swept through the hall. The mistake, if it was one, went uncorrected. But to those who understood the palace game, it was anything but accidental. It was a humiliation, finely wrapped in plausible deniability. Behind the scenes, aides scrambled. One junior staffer, reportedly shaken by the evening's events, leaked a copy of the original run sheet to an outside contact. The document, later passed discreetly to Sophie's assistant, revealed everything. Catherine was meant to be seated beside the king. She was scheduled to give remarks mid-banquet, and she was to be highlighted in the evening's closing toast. Every point had been altered, every promise erased, and yet no public acknowledgement of these changes was ever made. Throughout the night, Sophie's discomfort became visible. She shifted in her seat, whispered with aides, and at one point was seen glancing toward William, whose forced stillness suggested an internal war he dared not expose. But it wasn't until Catherine quietly declined dessert, barely touching her glass, that Sophie's fury finally ignited. It was no longer a case of accidental oversight. It was character assassination in slow motion, played out beneath chandeliers and polished silverware. Every insult had been packaged to appear insignificant, but when combined, they told a damning tale. This wasn't about etiquette. It was about erasure, and it was clear who was orchestrating it. But Catherine's quiet endurance only deepened Sophie's resolve, and by the end of the night, the Duchess of Edinburgh was no longer willing to stay silent. The Duchess had kept her distance from internal skirmishes, always choosing grace over drama, but tonight was different. As the tension mounted and Catherine's smile strained, something in Sophie snapped. In full view of the aristocracy, she rose not just in protest, but in defiance. Sophie had seen enough. The subtle reassignments, the backroom whispers, the public slighting of Catherine, all of it boiled beneath her composed exterior. But this banquet was the final insult. She had watched her sister-in-law walk in with dignity, only to be met with cold calculation masked as royal protocol. When Catherine's name was excluded from the speaker's order and she was pushed to the periphery of both attention and relevance, Sophie's hands had clenched beneath the table. It was no longer about hierarchy, it was about cruelty. And Sophie, who had always played by the rules, realized those rules had been rewritten behind her back. Early in the evening, Sophie had attempted to intervene quietly. She had approached a senior aide to confirm Catherine's role in the evening's formalities, only to be intercepted by one of Camilla's most trusted secretaries. The message was clear, decisions had been finalized, and it was not her place to interfere. It wasn't just dismissive, it was a warning. But what rattled Sophie even more was Edward's reaction, or rather, his lack of one. Throughout the night, he remained silent, immersed in conversation with diplomats, occasionally casting puzzled glances but offering no resistance. Was he truly unaware of what was unfolding, or had he been warned to stay out of it? Sophie didn't know. But at that point, she stopped waiting for permission to act. Then came the toast, a carefully staged climax of the evening. Catherine, once a cornerstone of such ceremonies, sat there ignored as the Queen Consort was praised for her guidance and grace. Sophie's chest tightened as she watched her friend, her sister-in-law, endure it all with a quiet strength that made the betrayal even more unbearable. And in that moment, something ancient stirred within Sophie, not rebellion, but integrity. The type that refused to let humiliation masquerade as tradition. She stood. The scraping of her chair against the polished floor sliced through the orchestra's melody. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Aides glanced nervously. Faces turned, confused, then alarmed. Sophie didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Her walkout spoke louder than any public rebuke ever could. Camilla, perched confidently moments before, was left expressionless, her control over the evening suddenly under question. For a brief second, even Charles appeared caught off guard. No one moved to stop Sophie, because no one knew what to say. The fallout was instant. Aides rushed to reassemble a press narrative that would neutralize the damage. The Royal Communications Office was reportedly flooded with panicked messages. Press releases were revised. Mentions of Sophie were scrubbed. An official explanation was drafted, citing an unforeseen personal matter. But those in the room knew better. They had witnessed something rare, unscripted defiance at the highest level of a family built on discipline and silence. And yet, Sophie's departure wasn't about making a scene. A truth too loud to ignore. The walkout wasn't just personal, it sent shockwaves through the monarchy. And the backlash? Swift, silent, and already taking shape. No scandal is allowed to live long inside the palace walls. But this time, damage control wasn't enough. Leaked emails, intercepted texts, and sudden changes to press schedules pointed to a desperate attempt to contain what insiders were calling the Duchess's revolt. Within hours of Sophie's dramatic walkout, the royal media machine jolted into overdrive. Photographs from the banquet, initially shared with select press outlets, were hastily pulled. Images that featured Sophie prominently were scrubbed or replaced with cropped versions, giving the illusion that her presence had been minimal, if not entirely absent. But those who attended knew better. The attempt to erase her defiance only fueled speculation. Behind closed doors, the palace's most seasoned PR operatives began crafting what they called a containment arc, a sanitized narrative built to redirect focus and smother controversy in layers of polite silence. But this time, the narrative refused to bend. Just 2 days later, Catherine's official appearances were suddenly postponed for rest. The statement, brief and clinical, lacked the usual warm wording that typically accompanied her schedule updates. Internally, aides were told to prepare for at least a week of public absence. It was a tactical retreat. Some claimed a move to shield her from further damage. But others whispered that it was forced, that Catherine herself had been encouraged to take a step back while the fallout was managed from higher up. What made the timing more suspicious was the simultaneous cancellation of a scheduled press briefing, one that would have offered reporters a rare opportunity to engage with senior palace representatives. Instead, a wall of silence descended over Buckingham and Kensington alike. As media outlets clamoured for clarity, a curious shift began to unfold in private royal chat circles. Encrypted messages started circulating, cryptic but telling. Phrases like, "She was never meant to speak," and "the signal was prearranged," hinted at a deeper orchestration behind the banquet humiliation. Journalists with long-standing palace ties received anonymous tips messages that traced back to someone deep inside. One such source didn't mince words. Catherine was set up, and they never thought Sophie would react. That single line lit a fuse. It confirmed what many had suspected, that the events of the banquet weren't a diplomatic accident, but a precision strike. Yet the most damning twist came when surveillance footage from the banquet hall, normally archived with meticulous care, was reportedly unavailable. An official spokesperson cited a temporary systems fault, a rare and implausible occurrence for an institution known for its obsessive control over internal documentation. The missing footage only intensified the conspiracy theories. If nothing improper occurred, why erase the record? Why silence the moment that now dominated every whispered corridor of royal gossip? In the absence of clarity, the void was filled with outrage, suspicion, and a renewed sense of fracture. The press couldn't print what they didn't have proof of, but behind the scenes, they were circling, waiting. And inside the firm, factions were forming. What was once viewed as an isolated incident now threatened to expose a much deeper, institutional rot, one that no amount of royal protocol could conceal. But the cracks couldn't be hidden for long, and what emerged next was not just a rift, but a family divided. For days, Catherine remained silent, but those closest to her say the Princess of Wales broke down privately, confessing the depth of betrayal she felt not just from Camilla, but from those who allowed it to happen. And in that moment, she made a quiet vow. Never again would she be caught unguarded. Behind palace doors, away from the relentless gaze of the public, Catherine's composure finally gave way. To the world, she was serene and unshaken, but in a rare moment of vulnerability, she confided in the only people she could trust, her sister Pippa, and a long-time aide who had stood by her since her earliest royal duties. Her words were raw, almost whispered. The banquet, she admitted, hadn't just been uncomfortable. It had been a calculated humiliation. Every detail had been designed to isolate her, diminish her, silence her. And the most chilling part? It hadn't come from a stranger. It had come from inside the family. She described the event not as a royal oversight, but a deliberate strike. It was coordinated, she said, according to one source. Deliberate and cold. When asked who she believed had orchestrated it, her answer was as swift as it was damning. Camilla. Not in a burst of rage, not out of resentment, but with the precision of someone who had come to see Catherine's grace as a threat. "She's strategic," Catherine reportedly said. "Not maternal. Not to me." It was a line that stunned even her closest circle. For a woman who had rarely spoken ill of anyone, especially within the institution, this was not bitterness, it was awakening. Sophie became her anchor in those stormy days. Messages of support, quiet visits, and long phone calls kept Catherine afloat. She knew Sophie had not only seen what happened, but had made the boldest gesture of support when no one else dared to. Sophie's walkout wasn't just symbolic, it was a reminder that Catherine was not alone. In a palace where silence is currency, Sophie had risked everything to speak without saying a word. William, meanwhile, was torn. Fiercely protective of his wife, yet bound by the chains of duty, he found himself cornered by the very system he was destined to lead. Catherine didn't press him. She didn't need to. She saw the conflict in his eyes. He had grown up with the weight of the crown on his shoulders, but he had also watched his mother crumble under similar pressure. He knew the cost of silence. And now, he faced a terrifying question: how long could he protect Catherine without turning his back on the institution? In the days that followed, subtle but significant changes began to unfold. Catherine started declining joint events that involved Camilla. Engagements that once symbolized unity were quietly removed from the calendar. When questioned by press liaisons, her team offered bland responses, scheduling conflicts, rest requirements, private matters. But the truth was far sharper. Catherine was drawing lines, not out of spite, but out of survival. She wouldn't confront publicly. She wouldn't expose herself to another trap. Instead, she would retreat, rearm, and rebuild on her own terms. Her silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. But while Catherine plotted silence as her shield, Camilla was already preparing her counterstroke, and this time, it would shake the monarchy's very core. Camilla wasn't going to be humiliated in silence. The Queen Consort may have worn a calm expression at the banquet, but palace aides say her fury exploded behind closed doors, and her next move wasn't personal, it was institutional. The morning after Sophie's walkout, Camilla wasted no time. Meetings were convened swiftly, some unofficial, others cloaked under innocuous labels, but the agenda was unmistakable: re-establish control. The Queen Consort wasn't looking for revenge, she was looking for reconfiguration. Within 48 hours, a decision was made to block Catherine from assuming a high-profile role with a major children's charity, one she had championed quietly for months. The explanation offered was vague: strategic reallocation of royal responsibilities. But those close to the matter confirmed it had Camilla's signature all over it. The timing was no coincidence. The message was clear: Catherine's influence would now be managed, not nurtured. Simultaneously, murmurs began to rise within Charles's inner circle. A select group of advisors floated the idea that key patronages should be redistributed among the newer working royals. Under the guise of modernization, they argued for a shift, one that subtly reduced Catherine's portfolio while elevating others more aligned with the Queen Consort's orbit. While Charles remained publicly neutral, insiders hinted that he was deeply torn. He had built a fragile alliance between Camilla and the rest of the family, and Catherine's growing prominence now threatened to destabilize it. Behind the scenes, Catherine was approached with what sounded like concern, but functioned as pressure. Her aides were informed that, in light of recent emotional strain, it might be best if she limited appearances for the foreseeable future. It was framed as compassionate, but it felt like exile. Sophie, too, was not spared. In what looked like administrative reshuffling, several of her lesser-known patronages were quietly reassigned to other royals without formal announcements. She was being pushed to the margins, her presence muted without a word of confrontation. Then came the most chilling move of all, Camilla's private dinner. Hand-picked guests, no press, no leaks, just a table surrounded by those loyal to her reign. It wasn't a celebration, it was a consolidation. A show of strength within the palace, a reaffirmation that the Queen Consort was not to be publicly challenged again without consequence. Those who attended described the atmosphere as tense, deliberate, and rehearsed. Names were mentioned, loyalty assessed. The message wasn't subtle. The monarchy would have one voice, and it wouldn't belong to Catherine. But while Camilla seemed to regain control, the palace itself began to fracture. Staffers found themselves divided not just in allegiance, but in ideology. Camp Catherine and Camp Camilla were no longer whispers, they were lived realities. Briefings were withheld, communications rerouted, trust eroded within departments that had once worked in lockstep. The royal household, bound by generations of protocol, now pulsed with quiet rebellion. Camilla may have believed the storm had passed, that the family was once again under her command. But just when it seemed Camilla had reasserted control, a mysterious letter surfaced, one that would tilt the balance back toward Catherine. A single letter, anonymous, typed, and slipped under the office door of a senior aide, contained details no outsider should have known. It wasn't just a message. It was a warning, and it painted Camilla not as queen, but as conspirator-in-chief. The contents of the letter were explosive, not because they screamed scandal, but because they whispered truth calculated, timed, and chillingly precise. It detailed the seating sabotage from the banquet with such accuracy that even the most trusted aides were left rattled. It mentioned not just that Catherine's place had been changed, but who had signed off on the revised chart. A single name stood out, one of Camilla's closest operatives, a senior official from the Royal Protocol Office. The letter alleged that this individual had not acted alone, but had received direction directly from within Camilla's household. It described coded language used in internal memos, secret meetings held under the guise of planning sessions, and a schedule deliberately altered to ensure Catherine would be sidelined at the most televised moment of the evening. But the shock didn't stop there. Buried halfway through the letter was a name unfamiliar to many in the royal machinery, a billionaire philanthropist with close social ties to Camilla's circle. The writer suggested that pressure had been exerted from outside the monarchy, that this individual had allegedly expressed concern about Catherine's growing public magnetism overshadowing Camilla's upcoming charity patronages. In exchange for discreet influence, the backer was promised stability in the public narrative. The allegation was explosive. If true, it meant palace dynamics were no longer just about blood and titles. They were being manipulated by power and money, from beyond the crown's official grasp. Even more disturbing were the letter's final lines. They hinted that the humiliation of Catherine was not a standalone act, but part of a longer campaign. The goal? To weaken her public image ahead of the monarch's upcoming coronation anniversary. It was about optics, ensuring Camilla's spotlight remained undiluted during a historic milestone. The plan, according to the anonymous author, had been drafted 6 months earlier. It had already been partially executed, and if no one acted, more would follow. The letter was delivered not to Catherine, but to Sophie. Why her? Because the sender knew she was the only one who had already risked something for the truth. When Sophie read it, everything that had felt wrong about the banquet snapped into focus. There was no hesitation. She marched directly to Edward and presented the letter. His reaction, according to one palace insider, was a mixture of disbelief, horror, and an immediate instinct to bury it. But Sophie wouldn't allow that. "We are not accessories to this," she reportedly told him. Not anymore. The leak of the letter didn't just validate Catherine's pain, it weaponized it. Now, the conflict had evidence, motive, and a growing witness list. It wasn't just about feelings, it was about facts. And the facts pointed to deliberate sabotage, orchestrated at the highest levels of the Queen Consort's court. Now, with tensions reaching their peak, William was forced into the role he always dreaded: mediator between the past and the future. He was born to unify, but now, William stood at a crossroads, watching the women closest to him fracture under the crown's crushing weight. What he did next would define not just his family, but the monarchy's future. And it all began with a late-night ultimatum whispered inside Kensington Palace. For days, William had remained the quiet observer, absorbing the chaos while suppressing the turmoil clawing at his conscience. But the letter changed everything. Its contents, its implications, and above all its undeniable truth, shattered the illusion of stability he had tried so hard to maintain. Catherine was not simply collateral in royal politics, she was a target, and the institution he had spent a lifetime defending had become complicit in her undoing. So, William did what no heir is ever taught to do. He challenged the very foundation of the throne he was born to inherit. That night, in a meeting few were told about, William summoned both Charles and Camilla to Kensington. No aides, no advisors, just 3 members of a royal triangle stretched to its limit. The atmosphere was taut, not with rage but resolve. William didn't shout, he didn't plead. Instead, he issued a line in the sand. Either the campaign to sideline Catherine ends, or she withdraws entirely from future royal engagements. It wasn't a threat, it was protection. One born from love, yes, but also from a dawning realization that silence was no longer a virtue. It was a weapon. He didn't stop there. William demanded sweeping reforms within the palace communications team. No more unofficial briefings. No more anonymous sources poisoning the press with narratives designed to humiliate or divide. He proposed an independent oversight group to ensure fair representation, transparency, and accountability. It was bold, unprecedented, and deeply unsettling to those who had operated in shadows for years. Charles sat torn. Between the son who represented the future and the wife who had fought tooth and nail to be accepted by the past. His silence was the loudest voice in the room. He listened. He nodded, but he offered no resolution. And that indecision cut deeper than any refusal. It left William standing alone in a palace that should have stood behind him. Camilla, on the other hand, didn't mask her fury. She accused William of betrayal, of undermining the unity of the crown. Her composure slipped, exposing a bitterness that had lingered beneath the surface for far too long. She saw Catherine's retreat not as a response to injustice, but as manipulation, and she viewed Sophie's silence as disloyalty. The room crackled with unspoken truths, ancient resentments, and the shattering reality that the royal family was no longer one family at all. Sophie, though not present, had already made her position clear. She declined every invitation that placed her beside Camilla. Her calendar, once filled with joint events and public appearances, became conspicuously selective. It wasn't rebellion in words, it was refusal in action. And so, the royal family shifted not through headlines or declarations, but through fracture. Behind closed doors, a new order was forming, one where alliances were drawn not by blood, but by trust, one where silence no longer guaranteed survival. As the dust settles, the monarchy emerges altered not by decree, but by rebellion from within. And somewhere behind palace doors, Catherine prepares not to fight, but to rise. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.